The Devil's Advocate is an incredibly entertaining examination of free will from director Taylor Hackford. Through the lens of a flawed judicial system, Keanu Reeves Kevin Lomax shows us how easy it is to become the slave to a fallen world, how easy it is to make an idol of the almighty dollar, and more importantly, how easy it is to make an idol of yourself. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of this film. I'm Brennan Sem for the New Wave Nerds, and I talk! I'm a podcast host. That's my job. That's what I do. Now let's roll the intro. The Devil's Advocate is directed by Taylor Hackford and written by Jonathan Lemkin and Tony Gilroy, starring Keanu Reeves, Al Pacino, and Charlize Theron. So as always, we're going to begin with a bit of a non-spoiler review. I love this movie. I'm just going to say it right out the gate. This is not the first time I've seen this movie. In fact, I think I have seen this movie 6 times. I watched it 3 times before we even started the podcast, and since deciding to review this, I've watched it 3 more times. Perhaps a little bit overkill, but I think it's worth it. I think it's definitely worth the watch. Right now, it's not available on any of the major streaming platforms, but you can watch it for free with ads on Plex, and I would definitely recommend checking it out if you've got a chance. Personally, this is my favorite Keanu Reeves movie. Don't get me wrong, there are so many amazing ones, like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, The Matrix, the list goes on and on, but I think The Devil's Advocate is far and away my favorite. As many times as I've seen The Matrix, I still think The Devil's Advocate has it beaten out. And furthermore, this is possibly my 3rd favorite film from Al Pacino. Of course, Al Pacino is one of the all-time greats. Anytime he's in a movie, it's amazing. But this is definitely my 3rd favorite. Nothing is ever going to beat out The Godfathers Part 1 and 2, but this comes moderately close. I mean, as far as films go, it's not the better than either of those two, but I certainly think in a lot of cases it is more enjoyable. Now, let's get into the spoiler section here. So I want to start out by talking a little bit about Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. I think their performances in this are absolutely amazing. They're both incredible actors. Like I mentioned, Al Pacino is one of the greatest to ever do it, and Keanu Reeves is pretty good too. I certainly wouldn't put him in the same category as Al Pacino, but nonetheless, his performance here is absolutely incredible. And I liked seeing them in opposition to each other. I thought that their chemistry was incredible. It really felt like such an interesting dynamic, and I loved the way that they go about it throughout the course of this film. The mentor-mentee mentality that eventually evolves into a bit of a standoffish father-son dynamic. I thought it was incredibly well done. The writing for all of the interactions between Keanu and Al Pacino is so amazing. And again, I'm probably a little bit biased here because I've seen the movie a million times, 3 of which were out of pure enjoyment. But I think the writing is really good. It felt, I don't know if natural is necessarily quite the word that I want to use here, but it felt very in character. It felt like the characters were fully developed and they had personalities that I felt shown throughout the entire movie. I liked the way that Al Pacino's John Milton sort of took Kevin Lomax through the more seedy underbelly of this corporate world to some of the, let's say, more shady spots. I enjoyed seeing that descent, and I think it was absolutely 100% well done. And I really want to talk about this father and son dynamic here a little bit. Obviously, we are in the spoilers section here. So in this film, it turns out that Al Pacino, whose character's name is John Milton in this, is actually none other than Satan himself, the enemy. And I really enjoyed seeing Keanu Reeves as he came to realize this. After Kevin, that's the character's name. After Kevin's mom tells him the story, I really liked the turnaround from the way that Kevin viewed John Milton before and after. It makes for a really interesting third act of the film. It makes for a really interesting last half hour, and it puts everything that you see in the beginning into a completely different perspective. And I think that's the hallmark of good story writing. I think that's the hallmark of a good screenplay, especially when it's something like this, where you find out a character has been deceitful from the very beginning. It makes you see everything differently, especially going back. Like I said, I've seen it 6 times now. So going back in seeing in the beginning all of the little hints that John Milton is not the man who he says he is, that John Milton is not necessarily a good influence on Kevin Lomax, and seeing Al Pacino's tics when Kevin Lomax does something that furthers his agenda. I think it's really, really fascinating. Like, for example, after Kevin Lomax first officially joins the team at Milton, I think it's like Milton, Chadwick, and Waters or something like that, but I could be wrong about the firm name. That's not the point. After Kevin officially joins the team, we have this scene in the conference room where Kevin is meeting the team. We have this scene where Kevin is introduced to everybody. He's introduced to the supporting characters like Eddie Barzoon, who is played by, let's see here, I want to mention it because he's a great actor and a terrible person. Jeffrey Jones, that's right, the principal from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, whom we have also seen in a My Father Before Me episode. Howard the Duck. That's right, Howard the Duck. And he was really fun in that. Certainly a very different character in this movie, but I think he played it off, and I think he pulled it off really well. But in this scene, there is a moment where Kevin Lomax is introduced to Christabella Andreoli, who's played by Connie Nielsen. And again, as we find out at the end of the film, this is John Milton's other daughter, or other child. This is his daughter. And John Milton has been playing Kevin Lomax a little bit to try and get these two to hook up. And when Keanu Reeves' gaze lingers on this character, on Christabella, we cut back to John Milton, and he has just this short little smirk, lasts for half a second. If you're not paying attention, you might miss it. It's just a little thing that at the moment you're like, little suspicious perhaps, but then when you go back after the first viewing, it makes sense. You understand why he has these little tics, and I think that it's really, really interesting here. Now, given that, I do want to switch a little bit to talking about the B plot, right? So the A plot of this story is Keanu Reeves, Kevin Lomax, joins this law firm, and he is assigned this case of a major real estate developer in the city, Alex Cullen. Cullen is accused of murder, and Keanu is tapped to lead the defense. That's the A plot. But the B plot follows Keanu Reeves' wife, who is played by Charlize Theron. Her name is Mary Ann Lomax. And Charlize Theron's acting in this movie is absolutely incredible. I mean, this was fairly early on in her career. This was only like her 3rd or 4th credit, and she absolutely blew it out of the water. Absolutely amazing. She was only 21 at the time of filming this, and I have to tell you, that does not make me feel good about myself. That does not make me feel good. But she is amazing, and I do believe that she could have been nominated for Best Supporting Actress. I don't know what else necessarily came out this year, but the performance there was absolutely amazing. And so the B plot about Marianne follows her slow descent into madness. So Kevin and Marianne, they're originally from Gainesville, Florida, relatively small town, nowhere near the size of the big city, the Big Apple, New York. And when they move to New York, naturally they are both incredibly excited. They both love the place, they love the apartment, they love the city life. But slowly, the pressure builds up for Marianne. It's too much change. It's very different. She is very alone and isolated. And that, coupled with the meddlings of Al Pacino's John Milton in this, it eventually starts to get to her, to the point where she begins to crack a little bit. Now, it is a little bit unclear to the extent what of this is natural and what of this is supernatural. For example, when Charlize Theron begins to crack, she looks at some of her quote-unquote friends, one of which is the wife of one of the lawyers at the firm, played by somebody who... Jackie Heath, that's the character's name. She's played by Tamara Tooney. They're in a dressing room, and Charlize Theron is gazing at her, and she sees Jackie's face sort of morph and turn into a demon. I believe she was also in Flight as well, which is good. Go check out that video if you haven't yet. That went live a couple weeks ago. She plays Margaret Thomason. I don't know, but she's in that. And I really liked her in this. I mean, we didn't get to see much of her, but she served her role as a vehicle to sort of facilitate Keanu Reeves' temptation in this, and I thought she did well. But so when they're in this changing room, Charlize Theron sees her face morph into that of a demon. And so it's a little unclear whether that is an actual morphing, if this is an actual demon in disguise, or if this is simply her descent into madness. I think it's safe to say that she probably is a demon. She probably was, and she revealed her face for a second there so as to facilitate the descent of Marianne Lomax. But it's incredibly fascinating, and the acting and the storytelling surrounding this character only gets better as we progress through the movie. You know, she has this interaction with John Milton where he tells her to cut her hair, and it's very, how do I put this, suggestive in nature. It's very, he's you definitely get the sense that Al Pacino's hitting on her a little bit. And what's crazy is that it's kind of working a little bit. He's a very smooth, suave man. Let's be honest, if he told me to cut my hair, I might do it. But nonetheless, so, you know, she goes through this as, what's his name? Kevin Lomax. I keep forgetting Keanu Reeves' character's name. As Keanu Reeves says, she makes this drastic change, and that does not help her image of herself. That does not help what's going on. And eventually all of this leads to the complete breaking down of Marianne's psyche. She falls apart. And this is accentuated by the fact that she and Kevin are attempting to have a baby. She goes to the doctor and learns that she has, I believe it's non-specific ovarian failure. She's unable to have kids. And after she learns that, which we don't actually see her learning that, but after it happens, she has this dream where she's walking around the apartment and she sees a baby in one of the rooms of their apartment. And the baby is holding her ovaries. And then she looks down and realizes there's blood on her nightgown. And she wakes up in a state of fear, and she's completely, this is when she breaks, right? It's after this scene where she has this nightmare. Kevin comes home and the two of them are talking, and they're like having this conversation. She's freaking out a little bit, and then she goes, "Shh, wait, do you hear that? Do you hear that?" And it's entirely believable. I mean, the acting there is really, really good. You definitely believe that Charlize Theron is going through a bit of a mental breakdown. And I read in IMDb trivia, so take it with a grain of salt, but I read that Charlize Theron actually consulted with a psychologist so that she could effectively mimic the mannerisms and idiosyncrasies of somebody who suffers from schizophrenia. It's incredibly fascinating, and it only gets crazier and crazier. So eventually, Marianne is committed to a psychiatric hospital. She's, 5150. And in the hospital, you can clearly see that she's cracked out of her gourd. They've loaded her up with all kinds of sedatives. She is not in any proper headspace. And Kevin's secretary, I suppose, her name's Pam Garrity. She's played by Deborah Monk. She shows her a mirror, or she gives her a mirror. She says, "Look, see how pretty you are. Look, you're so pretty." And then she flashes her own face in the mirror, and her face similarly morphs into the visage of a demon. And after this, Marianne Lomax freaks out. She scratches her eyes, forces her out of the room, and the mirror falls to the ground and cracks. And she pushes a chair up against the door so that nobody can get in. At this point, Kevin Lomax rushes back, and he realizes what Marianne is going to do here. She picks up a shard of the mirror, and this is another scene where the acting from Keanu Reeves is just so amazing here. You can feel all of the emotion. It really does feel as though the love of his life is going to commit an action that is irreversible. I'll put it that way so that we don't get docked in the algorithm. And it is amazing to see the emotion come over him, the realization. He's trying to break through the door. He breaks the glass on the window to the door with a chair, but there's a wire and there's wires in between the panes of glass. So it literally doesn't help at all. I mean, I don't know what his thought process was there, but I suppose in a situation like that, you're not exactly thinking straight. And she eventually makes that irreversible decision with the shard of glass. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, if you don't understand what I'm saying here. And eventually, of course, it's right after she does the act. Perfect timing. He's able to break in through the door, and he's just cradling her in his arms, obviously trying to stop the blood initially, but he's just trying to cradle her and asking her not to leave. And the performance there was heartbreaking. I mean, it was just so good. Now, and like I said, I think Marianne's descent here is such a perfect B-plot because it does what a B-plot is supposed to do. It reinforces the themes of the A-plot, right? So after this happens, after Marianne does this deed, Kevin Lomax decides that he needs to confront John Milton. His mom tells him that John Milton is his papa, and he goes to rush out. And we get this long interaction between Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves, where Pacino is like waxing poetic on the state of the world. He's discussing the role of free will and his role in the world and in society. And this is the moment where I feel like the film actually has like some sound theological teachings, which is a little bit surprising from a Hollywood film, you know? But there is sound theology there. As Al Pacino says, he's not the puppet master. He doesn't control the strings. He doesn't decide what's going to happen. He doesn't force you to do anything. All he does is push and nudge. He does actions that try to force you to fall away from the holy and the righteous and to come towards him. He doesn't force anybody to do anything. The choice is yours. The choice is yours. He says that multiple times. He's like, who did this? You know, what did I do? He tells Keanu Reeves, you had 1,000 chances. And he does. Again, on multiple viewings of this movie, you realize that every single step along the way, Keanu Reeves makes the wrong choice. Every single step of the way. This is the fault of Keanu. This is his fault. As Pacino says, his favorite sin is vanity. And that is what he uses, or that is the aspect of Kevin Lomax's personality that he uses and plays and pushes and nudges to move Kevin away from home, away from his God-fearing mother, away from his loving wife, away from the union that he made before God, and into this world of sin and temptation. Al Pacino even gives Keanu Reeves multiple outs. The one that comes to mind right off the bat is after Marianne. So this is like maybe an hour 15 into the movie or so. Marianne this is when she's first descending into madness, and Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves are walking down the street, and Pacino says, "I'm taking you off the case." And Kevin goes, "What? That's not happening. We got to talk about this." And Pacino goes, "What is there to talk about? Do you love this woman? This is your wife. This is your wife." He says specifically, "The world would understand." And then Keanu Reeves, he makes the choice. He says, oh man, what's the line? It's such a great line. He says, oh geez, I'm trying to remember. He says, "You know what I'm afraid of? I quit the case, and then Marianne gets better, and I hate her for it." And Kevin makes the decision to stay on the case. He makes the decision to effectively abandon his wife. He decides that his job, his career, his reputation is more important than that of his wife. It is Keanu Reeves' choice. And I think that's so fascinating. I mean, that is literally the bedrock of Christian theology. I mean, that is the bedrock. You have to choose to walk with Jesus. I mean, his mother says it in I want to say in the opening somewhere here. But I'm just going to read from the English Standard Version of the Bible here, if I can find it. It says, so this is Book of Matthew, chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it." That's about choice. He's saying that the gate is narrow. It is a hard path to walk. You have to decide. It is very easy to fall away and fall off of that path. And the theology here goes a little bit past that. I mean, right in the beginning, when Kevin Lomax first gets offered the job, his mom says, a verse about the fall of Babylon the Great, right? Which is this city which is, a hub of hedonism and pleasure and sin. And New York is the embodiment of that in this. And way in the beginning, this is, a fun little thing. In the beginning, not Marianne. What's his mom's name? This is gonna bother me. Let me see if I can find Alice. Yes, played by Judith Ivey. She says, he's being a little pretentious, let's say. And she's like, "Oh yeah, you remember? Then what happened to Babylon?" And he repeats a verse about the fall of Babylon and how at the end there shall be no lamps lighted in the city, right? And then way at the end, when Kevin Lomax is going to confront John Milton, he walks out of the hospital onto the street, and the street is completely empty. There are no lamps. There are no people. It's the middle of the day in New York City, and it is completely barren and destroyed. Well, not destroyed, but completely barren and lifeless. And that's pretty interesting, too. And another thing that I really, really enjoyed is relatively early on, when Kevin first comes to the office of Milton. I'm pretty sure it's Milton, Chadwick, and Waters, but once he first comes to New York and meets with the lawyers, he meets Milton, and they're in his office originally, and Milton opens a door and they walk out onto a balcony, and it has this beautiful view of New York City. And they're standing there, they're discussing, and Al Pacino says, there's a lot of potential clients out there. A lot of potential clients, a lot of money for you, Kevin Lomax. There is a lot of potential here. You can have all of this. You can have this view. You can have the amazing apartment. You can be at the top of the world. And that, the first thing I thought of when I saw that is this other verse from the book of Matthew. And this is chapter 4, verse 8. And this is when the devil is trying to tempt Jesus. This is when the devil is trying to tempt the Son of God into coming over to his side. And the verse reads, chapter 4, verses 8 through 10. It says, "Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all of the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, all of these I will give to you, and you will fall down, if you will fall down and worship me. Jesus said to him, away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." So in the book of Matthew, the devil takes Jesus to this high mountain and says, this will be yours. You can be prince of this world. You can rule over all of it if only you fall down and worship me. And in the devil's advocate, he does the exact same play. He takes Kevin Lomax to this balcony, shows him all of New York. He says there's lots of potential clients. This can be yours if you come and work for me. And it's really, really interesting the way that they do it. Like I said, I think it's really fascinating. I mean, there is surprisingly sound theological teachings in here, which again, you would not expect from a Hollywood film. And, you know, I mentioned earlier that throughout the course of this, Keanu Reeves, Kevin Lomax, makes the incorrect decision every step of the way. And that extends to the end. When Kevin Lomax realizes that John Milton is actually Satan, he is the devil, and the devil is trying to tempt him. He is saying, I want you to take over the company. This is yours. It's my time, baby. And he brings in Christabella, you remember his daughter, the woman with whom Kevin Lomax has been infatuated with since the very beginning. And he says, I want you two to make a baby. I want you two to bring me a child. And I think the line is, the scene is pretty fun where Kevin Lomax goes, the Antichrist. And Al Pacino just goes, whatever. But Keanu Reeves in there, he says, but I have to volunteer, right? I have to make the choice. And Al Pacino goes, free will. What are you going to do about it? And so in the end, Kevin Lomax still makes the wrong decision. In the end, rather than joining up with John Milton, he chooses to take his own life, which is still the wrong decision. At that point, he could have simply walked out. He could have simply left. He could have walked away from Satan, walked away from the devil, returned to Gainesville, met up with his mom, and become a church boy. He could have lived a happy, well, partially happy because his wife's dead, but he could have lived a partially happy, fulfilling life with God had he just left. But instead, he chooses to take his own life. He makes the wrong decision every single step of the way. And I think it's really, really interesting. I mean, like I said, the writing here is incredibly, incredibly well done. One thing that I am sort of hesitant about is the ending itself, right? So as I mentioned, Keanu Reeves shuffles loose his mortal coil to avoid the grips of Satan. And then Al Pacino goes a little crazy with some fire that is not necessarily a great effect, and his face melts away into Keanu Reeves' face. in an effect that isn't necessarily great. And it's weird having Keanu's face, but it's still Al Pacino's voice yelling, "No!" That's a little bit weird. But on that, real quick, I did bash that a little bit, but I want to say, when they do that, Al Pacino, his face morphs again into Keanu Reeves, his clothes melt away, and he has wings behind him. He grows wings. And again, he is Lucifer, the fallen angel, the bringer of light. So I think it's just some fun little theological things here. I'm a little bit curious about the end because, like I mentioned, we get these flames and then we zoom out and we see that these flames are in the pupil of Kevin Lomax. And we jump back way to the beginning in the middle of the Getty's case, where he's in the bathroom and the reporter's taking a leak, and he goes, "Whoa," and jumps back. And then they have this whole thing where, Kevin Lomax realizes that he can't defend John Geddes anymore. I don't know if his name's John. I don't know. It doesn't matter what his first name is. He's a bad guy. So he decides that he can't defend him anymore. He walks out of the courtroom. Reporters are hassling him, but he's like, whatever. I'm going to leave. He and Marianne are walking down the stairs. And this reporter who had a little bit of a role in the beginning and had a role at the end, he eventually talks Kevin into giving him an interview. He says, "I'm going to make you a star, baby." And Keanu Reeves and Kevin Lomax, that's the same guy. Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron walk away. We get this shot of the reporter, and his face morphs into the face of John Milton. And he has this last line, which is pretty, it's great. It's a nice callback. He goes, "Vanity, definitely my favorite sin." So my question here about this is, was the entire movie like a hallucination? Was the entire movie, how do I put this, like a possible timeline? Or did those events actually happen? Did they actually happen? And does Al Pacino, does the devil have the ability? Let me phrase it this way. I guess here's my question, and I'm not necessarily sure on the theological teaching here. So we understand that God, as the ultimate creator of all things, is outside of time. He is the originator of time, right? It's not like a situation where he watches, he doesn't see time linearly like I do. The way that it's described to me, again, linearly, we see time as a straight line, point A, point B, point C. Or for you, I guess it would be point A, point B, point C. God views time as a circle where he views all of the points at the exact same time. My question is, does Satan exist in the same way insofar as he is outside of time? Because I had assumed that he viewed the world in a linear manner, right? He has a beginning, a middle, and an end in a way that God does not, because God is the beginning, he is the middle, and he is the end. So that's not something I'm necessarily sure about. I don't know if that final scene is necessary. I don't know if it's necessary. I think you could have left off with him, freaking out and burning into flames, and you wouldn't have lost anything from the film, but I'm not so sure. So to wrap things up, I should say, I did want to point out some of the little fun, symbolical things. Obviously, the most obvious is the fact that Al Pacino's character's name is John Milton. John Milton is an English poet who made his most famous, an incredibly prolific writer. His Areopagitica is one of the most incredible defenses of free speech. But his most famous work is Paradise Lost, which is an epic poem that chronicles the fall of man. And Lucifer, Satan, plays a massive role in that story. Now, there are some people who read that and read into it the fact that Satan is this sympathetic figure, right? They don't view it as he is the enemy of the story, and people ascribe that belief onto John Milton, but that's certainly not what Milton thought, and that's not what he believed when he was writing it, especially if you look at like the contemporaneous writings and the contemporaneous theological teachings. John Milton was not setting out to make Satan a sympathetic figure here. But it is interesting to me. And then obviously we also have the fact that the law offices, they're in a building called Penta Plaza. That's fun. Penta, get it? Pentagram. Fun little stuff like that. And then my personal favorite one is we don't see this until Marianne is committed to the institution, right? After she does the thing that she does with the mirror shard, the nurse runs in and she's yelling, "Go get the doctor, get Dr. Job." Now, this is my favorite one because the book of Job is my favorite book of the Bible. And the book sets out to sort of explain why there is suffering in the world if God is just. Because, one of the main sort of, how do I put this? One of the main statements of like an atheist say is that if God is just and if God is righteous, why do we have disease? Why do we have cancer? Why do we have war and famine and all of this, right? Why is the world so terrible if God is all good? And the book of Job addresses that. It says, look, suffering is an aspect of the world. But if you are faithful to God, if you are faithful, well, I was going to say if you're faithful to Jesus, but that book was in the Old Testament, so pointless. If you are faithful to the Father, then it will work out in the end. Job loses everything, literally everything, all of his belongings, his entire family, his friends, but he stays faithful, and in the end, he is rewarded twofold. In the institution scene, Charlize Theron, as she's strapped to a bed or whatever, she says, "It's all a test. It feels like a big test." This movie is in some way a story of Job. Except Kevin doesn't stay faithful. I mean, he's fallen away at the beginning and he never returns. He never returns, right? It's not like this doesn't end with a happy ending with him realizing, "Oh, you are Satan. You are evil. I should turn my vision, my mind, my heart to God." He makes the wrong decision, right? I think that is really fun and really, really interesting here. I think the movie is amazing, and I think if you haven't seen it yet, you are missing out. Like I said, I mean, this is my favorite Keanu movie. Obviously, he's got a bunch of great movies, but I just think it's amazing. Like I said, it's currently available now on Plex with ads, I believe, and a lot of ads. There's a lot of ads on there, and they're long too. There's like 6 ad breaks of 2.5 minutes. It's crazy, but I love the movie, and I think you should all check it out. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of this film, and let's see. We'll be back here Thursday to review the first 2 issues of the ongoing Magic series from Marvel Comics. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm excited to see where we're going to go in the future. So stick around to hear my full thoughts, and I will see you guys on Thursday.